that lovely introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, today I want to talk about a whole bunch of different things. It's going to be all over the place, but here we go. I was in jail the evening I became the first Black person to win the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Let me explain, because I think I should. It's a great story. I teach at Chicago State University. This is a university located in one of the most distressed parts of Chicago, the South Side. The immediate area around the university isn't gang central, but it's rough, really rough. You don't have to walk far to get to the problematic sections. Much of the crime that Chicago is known for happens right around the university. Chicago State is sort of a beacon of light and hope in the middle of trouble and cloying darkness. I hate to sound dramatic, and maybe I should have avoided using that baggage-laden analogy of light and dark, but this is the reality. The majority of my students are often the first of their families to attend college. Many are the ones who push through despite their circumstances. They're the ones who sought education as the best way out. Many of them are the anomalies and hopes of their families. For me, having grown up in an upper middle class, predominantly white and Jewish neighborhood in the Chicago suburbs, teaching here has been an eye-opening experience. Chicago State isn't officially an HBCU, a historically black college or university, but its student body is mostly Black. The best part of my experience there has been my interaction with the students. One of my favorite students was Jermaine Reed. Jermaine was born and raised in the Robert Taylor Homes, one of Chicago's most infamous projects. And whenever I get stuck in traffic heading south, I take State Street to bypass I-94. I remember back when the Robert Taylor Homes were still standing. Whenever I'd pass those looming, crumbling concrete towers, I'd roll up my windows, and you should see how fast I'd speed. Those towers looked so terrifying. And the way Jermaine described his life there corroborated the images of crime, hopelessness, and violence that I held in my head. Jermaine talked about being close with gang members, yet avoiding joining them. Unlike most of his age mates, he had no police record. In 2010, he was in his final year at Chicago State. He'd been accepted into the English department's graduate program to pursue his master's degree. He was an excellent writer who loved to debate all things, especially the issue of gun control. He firmly believed in his right to carry a weapon. He'd come in my office and take up my lunchtime and office hours by engaging me in arguments I couldn't resist. And in my journalism class, he wrote an opinion piece about why everyone in Chicago should carry a gun. Can you imagine that? His argument was so well constructed that he had the whole class, including myself, convinced of our need to carry a weapon and keep one in the home. I still can't believe that. Seriously, his argument was really, really good. Jermaine was strongly considering becoming a member of the NRA, and he regularly went to the gun range to practice shooting his weapon. He kept 2 in his home. Jermaine came from a neighborhood where having a weapon in the home to defend his family was a good idea, and relying on the police was laughable. One day while returning from practicing at the gun range, Jermaine got into an altercation with an ex-friend. This friend was bigger and stronger than him. The two began to fight, and Jermaine was beaten bloody in front of a crowd who did not help. The police were nearby, and they didn't come and stop the fight either. That's Chicago. It was only after trying to flee and being caught and then strangled that he took out his gun to solve his problem in the only way he felt he could in that moment. The young man he shot didn't die and would go on to make a full recovery, but this was why Jermaine was in jail, and I was visiting him that evening. The night I went to visit Jermaine in the Cook County Jail, I knew it was the night of the World Fantasy Awards. However, I was busy, as always. It was the middle of the semester at Chicago State, and Chicago State had me teaching a load of 4 classes, and I had assumed I hadn't won. I'd been a Nebula Award finalist, a Locus Award finalist, and a finalist for so many other awards, and plus my student was in jail. My mind was elsewhere. 2 days before, Jermaine's girlfriend had emailed me and then called me to tell me about what had happened, and my mind was still reeling with the news. This was a part of being a professor I had never foreseen. By the time I parked my car that evening, I wasn't thinking about any award ceremony. I was terrified for Jermaine. I was terrified for myself. I did not want to go in there. I went with a friend of mine, and she and I entered the dirty white concrete chunk of a building. I looked around the dreary waiting room, all black people, except for a few Latinos. My friend and I were processed, and eventually we went with a group of about 15 other people. No one was allowed to bring a cell phone or any other form of identification, and we had to leave all of our things in lockers outside. So for that hour, I was cut off from the world. We were led through the jail to the room with chairs in the thick glass that would separate us from the prisoners. When they filed in wearing their orange uniforms, they were gregarious and in high spirits. However, what struck me most poignantly was that they were all young black men, locked up like rats, wasting time, wasting away. Jermaine spotted me immediately and came right over. He was thin, but he smiled. We talked for about 15 minutes. He told me about the particular gang he had to align himself with to survive in there. And he told me all kinds of things, all with a smile on his face. I left that room very angry. He'd managed to survive the projects, gotten through his BA, was on his way to a master's, and somehow the system and his own upbringing had still gotten to him. I know of the new Jim Crow, and if you haven't read Michelle Alexander's book, read it. It's very insightful. But seeing it up close was different. Now that the system had its hands on him, I was sure that it would not let go so easily. There's nothing rehabilitative about the American prison system, and when one is jailed, the purpose is to destroy that person, not rehabilitate him or her. And most of those people are black and male. When I came out of the building, it was cold and lightly raining. The weather suited my mood. I got into my car, and I sat there for a moment, shivering and furious about so many things. I turned on my car, and as it warmed up, I powered up my cell phone, and it went mad. It buzzed and made bubble sounds over and over again as it received text message after text message, voicemail message after voicemail message. For minutes it did this. I read the very first text message. It was from my young adult novel editor at Penguin, Sharon November. The text said 2 words: "You won." It was utterly surreal. It took me a moment to figure out what the heck she was talking about. So fogged my mind was with jail and America's evils. Who Fears Death had won the World Fantasy Award for Best Novel. Wow. As this fact sunk in, I felt like my mind would break in the way that the strongest glass would break when it's hit with extreme hot and cold at the same time. The combination of my emotions in that car on that strange night, the rage, the elation, truth, shock, the reality of consequence, hope and sadness, the residual effects of claustrophobia, became a creative force in the way that pressure can create a diamond. Over the next few weeks, then years, I'd write Jermaine often and send him tons of books. He developed a taste for speculative fiction, burning through Tad Williams's Otherland series, Pullman's His Dark Materials, Collins's Hunger Games. With my encouragement and due to his need to keep his mind active, he had also penned a book. Jermaine is still in jail, and it's been 3 years, and it will be another 2 before he gets out, which is better than the 30 years he could have gotten if he decided to fight by claiming self-defense and lost. As for me, weeks after that night, I began to imagine an American city in the very near future, maybe 50 years from now, maybe 50 years from now. In the downtown area of this big city was a tower, one that was similar to the Cook County Jail downtown near the Sears Tower. This future tower was full of people who had been genetically created, born or raised there, and were watched closely by military security called the Big Eye. The genetically created people in the tower did not know what freedom was because they had never been free. These people were not feared, and most of them were black. All of them were being used, and some of them were dangerous. And one of the most dangerous was about to decide to seek freedom. This story that brewed hotly in my mind would start off as a short story, graduated to a novella, and then become a full novel called The Book of Phoenix. When I consider empires and worlds, this is the prime example of how I create them. I don't. They're already there. I live them and am affected by them, and I write about them. And in return, sometimes those worlds write about me. In Who Fears Death and the Akatawitz series, I call up certain spirits and ancestors and call up mystical practices used to this day. The mystic points in Who Fears Death are Igbo cosmology. The Igbo people are the 3rd largest ethnic group in Nigeria. Both of my parents are Igbo and I'm Igbo. Being Igbo is blood, not nationality. So the mystic points in Who Fears Death are simply Igbo cosmology. Within it, the phrase, "Let the eagle perch and let the hawk perch," is the golden rule. It's a rule of welcoming and tolerance. Masquerades in Akatawitz are manifestations of spirits and ancestors in Nigeria and in most African cultures. Masquerades are powerful, and you do not want to mess with them unless you actually want to suffer dire consequences. One Nigerian man once warned me that you can't write about something without it writing about you. From last year, I could tell you about things that happened to me that you think came right out of my novels. I could tell you bizarre happenings. I could tell you about the relentless effects of powerful objects from distant lands. I'm not kidding. I could tell you about the presence of Shango, the thunder god, and the fear of the water spirit known as Mamiwata. I could tell you about prophecies that came true, conversations I had with princes, and feuds that I had with kings. 2013 was pretty wild. After all I went through, I learned that there are certain things that my stories call forth, and there are consequences for those callings. I'm okay with this now. Took me a while to get there. This is the world I live in and react to actively. I consider the definitions of fantasy and science fiction over the years, even this semester, when I asked my class what they thought about fantasy and science fiction, one of my students said that fantasy was unrealistic fiction. That was her definition, unrealistic fiction. Another said that science fiction was fiction that could never be true. I'm not making this up. This is what I was told. Oh, man, so much work to do. Another said that fantasy was fiction where everything was made up. This was all this semester. All this semester. These would have made me laugh if I weren't so annoyed. Some speculative fiction may be unconcerned with realism, sure, but mine sure as heck is deeply concerned with it. In my novel, Lagoon, I drew from Lagos, the city of Lagos. I've been to Lagos many times. This is a little aside. I had a very happy childhood. The world was so rosy to me, not that I didn't have my issues. I went to a terribly racist school and lived in a racist neighborhood, so I had to deal with racist strangers and racist teachers and even racist friends. An example, my best friend, Renee Norris. We lived next door and were thick as thieves. We both wanted to study animals, we both loved insects, we both had a good time in general. Then one day, after years of friendship, we were both 8 years old, we had an argument over a donut. And she got mad and called me a nigger. We never spoke again at the end. So, anyway, so my childhood was very rosy and happy. Thus, my time spent in the city of Lagos were always fun. But when I hit my teens, I began to really see things as they were, not through such rosy, rose-tinted eyes of childhood. I was 16 when I arrived in Lagos, yet again, and by the time we got to the hotel, I was so terrified by the chaos around me that I was scrunched near the bottom of the seat, my eyes closed and my hands pressed to my ears. I'd seen a dead body in an alley, a driver who nudged a regally dressed woman with her cab for crossing the street too slowly. One driver spit at about 10 people as we drove. Our driver spit at about 10 people as we drove, shouting things like, I gotta say these the way he said them. Damn your mother! And anofia, which means wild animal. And of course, there were the illogical breakneck speed killer. There was the illogical breakneck speed killer driving. That was only in my first 15 minutes in Lagos. That particular visit to the great city went on to be both exciting in wonderful and terrifying ways. And I didn't return to Lagos for over a decade for that reason. When I set out to write Lagoon, Lagos means lagoon in Portuguese. The city surrounds a huge lagoon. I was able to pour it all into that story. Lagos is predicted to be one of the biggest cities in the world in a few years, if not the biggest. So Lagoon is a mashup of colonialism, Nigerian ingenuity, chaos, and brilliance. And Lagos is the perfect place for an alien invasion. I'm supposed to return to Lagos in this November, and considering that I've now written an alien invasion story about that city and the idea that stories tend to write about us, I'm a little nervous about the journey. More than a little nervous. So I've discussed rage, truth, and consequence at a conference dedicated to the arts of the fantastic. I can just imagine some of my old professors humphing and pursing their lips at this because, in their opinion, speculative fiction couldn't possibly be connected or grafted to, the result of, melded with, born from, part of really, really, truly realistic world, our really, really, truly realistic world. So instead of ranting about this, I'll opt to end on a thoughtful note and quote one of my favorite authors, Nigerian author Ben Okri. This is from his book, Birds of Heaven. And if you don't have this book, you should totally get it if you can find it. It's a little tiny packet. And it's just full of just wisdom. It's easy to forget how mysterious and mighty stories are. They do their work in silence, invisibly. They work with all the internal materials of mind and self. They become part of you while changing you. Beware the stories you read and tell. Subtly, at night, beneath the waters of consciousness, they are altering your world. Thank you.
all of you. I'd like to thank Nnedi for such an insightful talk, and also one that contains such good warnings. Life does indeed imitate art, and apparently this is a very dangerous thing for writers as well as readers. Thank you so much, and we look forward to tonight and your very generous offer to discuss this important film. Thank you very much.